Do you feel that you study way too much? Well, don't worry, because in this video I will be going over how I, as a straight A student with a 4.0 GPA, only study around 1 to 2 hours each day on average. Now, this usually depends on how many exams I have, but I would say that it's a good rough estimate on how much I study. And you don't need to study that much to become a really good student. It's more about study techniques and how you approach studying. If you just read everything from top to the bottom, you won't see any results, or you will have to be studying 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day to get the A's that you actually want. So I will be going over my top 2 tips and then some extra small tips here and there on how to actually get started. So let's get started with tip number 1, and that is the 80-20 rule. Now, this isn't a memorization technique or active recall in any sort of way. This is a way of how to approach the things that you want to learn. So the 80-20 rule is that 80% of the most important parts of the subject can be tackled by reading and learning about the 20 most important parts. So let's say that I have coursework about organic chemistry and it will be about bonds. So I will only study about bonds. Maybe they're only 20% of the actual course, but you can implement them in each and every single question. You want to learn them, and you have learned roughly 80% of the course. So you need to learn how to prioritize the tasks that are most important, and then just keep on pushing them, studying them, and you will see results in 80% of the subject. But what about the last 20%? Well, by doing the 20% first that are the most important, you will get a good understanding of the concept. You will know almost everything, but you just continue to study the most important topics. You read through everything, and you will get those 20 extra percent just out of thin air, because the brain automatically connects dots, so you don't have to do it manually. Our brains are much better at their work and what you think they are. So have that in mind. Only focus on the top 20%. So what I would do is, if you have a big test upcoming, I would start by writing down a list. So do I have an exam next week? And it's about a specific subject. Write down every single thing that you can think of that might come up on this test, and just prioritize them. Take the high priority items, put them in a separate bracket, and that's where you will spend 80% of your time studying. And then separate the low priority items, and you spend the rest of the 20% of your studying on those tasks. And you will learn so much faster, but you will also learn more relevant information, so you have time for everything else, because you probably have a lot of courses and subjects you need to study. So this is good if you have that. But how do you actually memorize these things? Well, I do something called Memory Palace. I actually have a book about this, and that is this book, Become a Super Learner by Jonathan Levy. Yeah, it teaches you how to build a memory palace. But in short, memory palace is quite simple. A memory palace is visualizing yourself in a specific setting. I usually do room, and you visualize that room, and you get a mental picture that's clear in your head. Then you read your notes, your coursework, and you connect the coursework to specific items in your room that you have. So let's say I have my computer right here, and let's say I have a presentation about Apple. I will probably connect some dots with the iMac because they are clashing. But it doesn't have to be things either. A good thing is that you can actually pretend to be placing things in your room. But how do you do that? Well, I saw a guy called Joan van Essen. He's extremely good at learning and memorizing specific things. And he was trying to memorize Oscar-nominated titles for movies. And he had these in a landing strip right here. And this landing strip that he had on his desk reminded him of the movie Top Gun, because he made that mental connection. Creating these mental connections will be hard at first, but it's actually quite simple. Just read the first important part of the list that you made for the 80-20 rule. Now take that thing, try to connect it with a specific subject you already have in your room, or create a mental image and connect it, and then place them in the room, and then just think about it, and you'll be super surprised on how well it actually works. Because when you do a memory palace techniques, it's all about actually sorting the information you have in your brain. It's like creating a mental library where you can just walk around and find the information you want. It's much more structured, and you will retain it for much longer without needing to use spaced repetition and other learning methods methods as well. So it's a special craft, but once you really get good at it, you can learn a whole book in a single day. And that's not an over exaggeration, because people actually do that. So that's a super important tip that I want to share with you. But when you want to do this 80-20 rule in your memory palace, you sit down and you actually want to study, but you can't focus. How do you actually focus? And you hyper focus. I have actually read a book called Hyperfocus, super good book by Chris Bailey. I promote this all the time without being sponsored for my communities and followers on Instagram. This is a really good book, and what this book basically talks about, how you need to not focus. And that might seem counterintuitive, but when you let your mind wander, and as he calls it, scatter focus, when you let that happen, you rest your brain, and then when you actually want to focus, you will focus much better, because you only have a limited attentional space, as he calls it, and you can't just multitask and press everything into that attentional space. So therefore, you need to learn how to actually put the most relevant tasks that are most important to you in that attentional space. So you need to quit multitasking. You need to quit checking for those quick dopamine hits, like scrolling on your Instagram, scrolling your TikTok. You're probably watching the comments on this video as we speak, or just watching emails in general. You shouldn't be letting your mind wander. So those are my top 3 elements of why I study so little but get so much work done, because becoming a good student, it's all about how to actually build an effective routine that is quick, so you have time to actually balance your life. Of course, maybe some weeks I study 4 hours a day, but some weeks I study 0 hours per day. So it really depends. But if you implement the 80-20 rule, the memory palace technique, and you use scatter focus, you will be able to plan your days, prioritize tasks, retain them and memorize them, but also focus when trying to retain them. And that is the magic formula. There's no other tips I would say to you that are better than that. So if you found this helpful, please subscribe, and I will give you more information like this in the upcoming weeks. I actually have some crazy videos planned, and I will be spilling all the tea that I have on my guides, and when I coach, you will be learning about everything. So I hope you don't miss out. And that is basically it. So thank you so much for watching, and DM me on Instagram if you need any help, and I will be sure to link some videos on how to actually do the memory palace technique, so you have much more knowledge about that, because otherwise this video might be 50 minutes to 1 hour long. So we don't want that. I'll see you in the next one.